Let's dive into this. This deep dive is built directly from source material you, our listener, shared with us. It's all about a goal that feels, well, almost magical when you reach it. Actually thinking in English.
Right.
You know, moving beyond that constant, sometimes pretty exhausting process of translating everything from your native language.
Yeah, it's a really fundamental shift, actually, in how your brain processes the language. And, as the sources show, it's just key to unlocking genuine fluency and confidence, too.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to take a deep dive into this material you sent. We want to understand exactly what thinking in English really means.
Yeah.
Shine light on why that translation step, slows things down quite so much, and pull out the practical, actionable steps the sources provide for making this crucial mental switch.
And we'll guide you through the core concepts, highlighting the most useful insights and techniques straight from the material you gave us.
Fantastic. Let's get right into it then. So when we say thinking in English, what are we actually talking about? Does it mean your native language just poof, vanishes?
That's a great question to start with, because the sources are quite clear. It doesn't mean you never use your native language again, especially not for complex or really abstract thoughts.
Okay.
But for the vast majority of, everyday basic thoughts and reactions, thinking in English means your brain uses English directly.
Directly.
Yeah. There's no intermediate step involving your first language.
So the brain sort of builds a kind of direct English pathway that bypasses the usual route.
Exactly that. Think of it less like erasing a road and more like building a super fast shortcut, a highway maybe.
Okay.
The sources use a perfect example actually to illustrate this. If you're hungry, instead of having the thought, "Estou com fome," if Portuguese is your first language, and then consciously translating that phrase into "I'm hungry," you just internally say or think "I'm hungry" right away. Precisely. The English phrase is immediately linked to the feeling or the concept of hunger itself.
Okay.
Not to the native language phrase for hunger.
Yeah.
It's about connecting English directly to reality or, to other English concepts.
And the benefit there is instantly obvious, right? It just cuts out that mental middleman.
It completely eliminates that multi-step translation process. And that, as we'll see, is where the real bottleneck happens for so many learners.
Which brings us neatly to the next point from the source material. Why does that translation chain slow us down so much? We've all been there, right?
Oh, yeah.
In a conversation, feeling like you're stuck in, quicksand while everyone else is just moving along smoothly.
It's an incredibly common experience, And the sources break down why it feels so slow. So imagine someone asks you a question like, what did you do last weekend?
Okay, simple question. I hear it in English.
Right. But if you're translating, here's what happens, according to the sources. Step 1. Your brain takes that English question, translates it into your native language to properly understand it.
Okay, step 1.
Step 2. You then figure out your answer, your response, but entirely in your native language.
Right, thinking it through in my first language.
Step 3. You take that native language answer and you have to translate it back into English. Word by word, maybe phrase by phrase.
Okay.
And finally, step 4, you try to assemble those translated English words and actually say them out loud, trying to make it sound coherent.
Wow. Saying it like that. That's 4 distinct mental steps just to reply to one simple question. It's, no wonder it feels like your brain is buffering sometimes.
It really is. And the consequence, as the sources point out, is that by the time you've done all that processing, formulated, translated, and you're finally ready to speak, the conversation has very likely moved on. The topic might have shifted or, someone else has already jumped in.
Oh, that's so frustrating.
Yeah.
It can definitely make you hesitant to even try to participate.
Yeah, it really can.
You see other people responding almost instantly, and you think, how are they doing that?
Yeah.
Do they just know way more words than I do? Is that it?
And the sources offer a really crucial insight here. It's often not about knowing more words. Fluent speakers aren't necessarily faster just because their vocabulary is infinitely larger.
Wow.
They're faster primarily because they have largely bypassed this multi-step translation process. They are thinking in the language. It allows their thoughts to flow much more directly into English expression.
Okay, here's where it really clicks for me. And the sources give us this fantastic, really memorable phrase for this. Fluency isn't speed, it's flow.
That phrase just captures it perfectly, doesn't it?
It really does.
It's not about how many words per minute you can rattle off. It's about the smoothness, the ease, the way your thoughts move from your mind through the English language system in your brain and out into speech. Thinking in English is about removing that translation friction to create that flow.
Okay, so if the problem is the translation chain and the goal is flow, how do we actually build this habit? How do we start thinking directly in English? The sources aren't just theoretical, right? They give us a very practical, step-by-step approach.
They absolutely do. Yeah, they propose a simple, pretty manageable 3-step method. It's designed to start training your brain to use English for your internal processing, like right away.
Okay.
It might feel a bit strange at first. The sources acknowledge that, but consistency is really the key.
All right, walk us through it. What's step 1?
Step 1, name what you see. This is probably the simplest practice to start with.
Okay, like just looking around the room I'm in right now, my office.
Exactly. As you go about your day, just take a few moments, maybe just a minute or two here and there, and quietly, either in your head or maybe under your breath, name the objects and things you see in English.
So, lamp, table, computer screen, tree outside, blue car, cloud, whatever you see.
All right, that sounds, easy enough to weave into a day. But why is something that simple actually effective? What's it doing?
Well, the sources explain that it builds your internal English vocabulary, for one. But more importantly, it strengthens those direct links we talked about earlier.
Okay.
You are connecting the English word, computer screen, directly to the actual object, the thing itself. You're bypassing the word for it in your native language.
Oh, I see.
You're activating that English part of your brain without needing your native language as a go-between. It's like creating direct neural pathways between the English word and the concept or the object, strengthening that connection.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Connecting the word straight to the reality. What about step 2?
Step 2, narrate your actions. Narrate my actions. So like talking to myself about what I'm doing, but in English.
Essentially, yes. But again, it's mostly internal or very quiet. Just describe what you're doing in simple English thoughts, like I'm standing up, now I'm walking to the kitchen, I'm opening the fridge, I need a glass of water, closing the door, that kind of thing.
That feels maybe a little odd at first. Do I need to make full grammatically perfect sentences for this?
No, not at all. And the sources really emphasize this point. The goal isn't perfect grammar. It's making English your internal processing language.
Right.
Simple phrases, even just 2 words sometimes, are perfectly fine. Making coffee, checking phone, walking outside. It's about making English the default language for your internal monologue about your immediate environment and actions.
So it activates the language for active use, not just understanding things passively.
Exactly. Active internal use.
Okay, so step 1 connects words to things. Step 2 connects English to my own actions. What's step 3?
Step 3, ask and answer easy questions. This is like having a very simple internal Q&A session with yourself in English.
Like if I'm trying to decide what to eat for lunch.
Yeah, simple things like that. Or what time is it? You look at clock, it's 9:15. Am I ready to leave yet? Almost. Where are my keys? You look around, on the table. What should I do next? Finish this task first.
These all sound like the kinds of, automatic internal thoughts people have all the time anyway.
Exactly. And the sources highlight that. These are really low-pressure ways to make English the language you use for processing your immediate reality and making those small, everyday decisions.
So it builds the habit.
It builds the habit of using English for active thinking, not just reactive translation. It's about framing English as the language for sort of internal processing and self-direction.
Okay, so the 3-step method is about building these small, consistent habits, naming things, narrating actions, simple internal Q&A to train the brain to use English for those basic, everyday internal processes instead of automatically defaulting to the native language. It's like targeted muscle training for the language part of your brain.
That's a good way to put it. It is. And while you're building these foundational habits, there's another really crucial concept from the source material that works kind of in tandem with this.
Okay.
And that's thinking in phrases or chunks, rather than focusing on translating word by word.
Yes, the dreaded word-by-word translation trap. I think we all fall into that sometimes.
Absolutely. As the sources point out, fluent English isn't usually built like a structure where you select one word, then the next, linking them individually like a chain.
Right.
Native speakers and fluent non-native speakers, too, often use natural combinations of words, what the sources call chunks.
I really like that term, chunks. It makes sense intuitively, like building with Lego blocks instead of trying to stick together individual grains of sand.
That's a great analogy. Yeah. The sources emphasize that these chunks are the real building blocks of conversation. So instead of processing how is it going as 4 separate words to be linked, you process and use how's it going as a single unit, a single chunk of meaning and sound.
Right. So you store and access these groups of words together as one thing. What are some other examples of chunks the sources give?
Oh, the sources provide lots of common ones. Things like, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Let me think. What do you mean? It depends.
Oh, yeah. It depends is a big one.
Huge one. I have no idea. Sort of. Kind of. All right. Take care. You're welcome.
These are phrases you hear and use constantly. You wouldn't actually assemble I, then am, then not, then sure every single time you wanted to say that.
Exactly right. You need to train your brain to recognize, store, and retrieve these as full units. Trying to translate or build conversations word by word is just incredibly slow, and it often sounds unnatural because you miss these common chunks.
Yeah.
And the sources give us another great phrase here. Speak in chunks, not in chains.
Speak in chunks, not in chains. Okay, tell me more about that comparison. Why chains?
Well, think about a chain, link by link. If one link is weak, or you can't find the next link quickly enough,
The whole thing breaks.
Exactly. The whole chain breaks under the pressure of a live conversation. But chunks are solid units. They're preformed. They don't break. They flow together naturally because they are the patterns native speakers actually use. When you use chunks, your language feels more natural and it actually requires less mental effort because you're accessing these pre-built units of meaning.
Okay, that makes sense. So we're practicing the 3-step method to build those internal English habits, and we're training ourselves to recognize and use chunks instead of building word by word. What else? What other tools does the source material recommend for boosting fluency?
There's another highly effective technique mentioned called shadowing. The sources describe it as a real fluency booster.
Shadowing. Okay, it sounds a bit mysterious. How does that work in practice?
It's actually quite simple in concept, although it definitely takes practice to get good at it. You listen to short audio, could be a few sentences from a deep dive like this, a line from a movie, song lyrics, anything really. And the key is you repeat what you hear out loud at the same time as the speaker, or maybe just milliseconds behind them.
Wait, so you're speaking while they're speaking. That sounds tricky. And you're not supposed to pause and translate it first.
Absolutely not. No pausing, no translating. That's the core principle of shadowing. You repeat without pausing, without translating, and you try to match the speaker's rhythm, their intonation, their speed, their pronunciation as closely as you possibly can.
You're essentially shadowing their voice.
Exactly. That's why it's called shadowing.
Okay, I can see how that completely bypasses the translation step. But what are the specific benefits the sources mention for doing this? Why is it so effective?
Well, shadowing, even though it feels challenging, especially at first, it offers multiple benefits according to the sources. First, it intensely improves your listening comprehension because you have to focus so closely on the sounds and the flow of the language.
Right, you have to really listen.
Second, it directly builds speaking fluency and confidence because you are physically practicing the sounds, the rhythms, the intonation patterns of natural English. And third, it helps build muscle memory in your mouth and tongue for the physical act of speaking English naturally. It connects the input, the listening, directly to the output, the speaking.
Strengthening those direct pathways again.
Exactly. Reinforcing those direct English-to-English pathways we discussed earlier, it forces you to adopt the natural rhythm and sound of English almost physically.
You're absorbing and reproducing the music of the language, like you said, not just the individual notes or words.
Precisely. And the sources even include a specific phrase they suggest is good for practicing shadowing with.
All right, listener, maybe let's try this together. I'll try it too.
Okay. It's a common conversational filler phrase. Let me think. I guess I'd say yes.
Okay, I'll say it, and you at home can try to shadow it right after me, or even kind of with me if you feel brave. Ready? Let me think. I guess I'd say yes.
Slightly overlapping or immediately after. Oh, let me think. I guess I'd say yes.
Trying again, perhaps closer in time. Let me think. I guess I'd say yes.
Yeah, see, it feels much more natural saying it like that, as a chunk, than trying to assemble it word by word, doesn't it?
It really does.
That's what shadowing helps build, that feeling.
It feels like a single unit of thought and expression. Okay, now we've talked about simple habits, using chunks and shadowing. These all require trying new things, putting yourself out there a bit, even if it's just internally right.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings up a major barrier the sources discuss. The fear, specifically the fear of making mistakes.
Ah, yes. The elephant in the room for so many language learners. That psychological hurdle of fear.
Yeah.
Fear of sounding silly, fear of using the wrong word, fear of being misunderstood, fear of just embarrassment.
Totally.
This fear is often what keeps people clinging to that slower, maybe safer feeling translation process, even though they know it hinders fluency.
That's a powerful feeling. So how do the sources suggest we tackle that fear? What's the advice?
They address it head on, actually. And they offer a truth that is both really simple and I think quite profound. Something every learner needs to internalize.
Okay.
It's this. You don't learn English by getting it right. You learn by getting it wrong and keeping going.
Wow. Okay, let that sink in for a second. You don't learn English by getting it right. You learn by getting it wrong and keeping going.
Yeah.
That really shifts the perspective, doesn't it?
It completely reframes it.
Yeah.
Mistakes aren't failures, they're necessary steps.
Yeah.
The sources frame mistakes not as proof that you're bad at English, but as essential feedback. They show you where you need to adjust, or maybe try again or learn something new.
Right.
Fluency isn't about achieving perfection from day one. It's about developing the confidence and the resilience to make progress.
Keep moving forward.
Exactly. The material really encourages you just to speak. To try to express yourself using the English you do have, however imperfectly you think it is. Trusting that your brain is constantly learning and improving from every single attempt, whether it was right or wrong.
So it's less about being flawless and more about being brave enough to just practice, to try.
Precisely. Action. Even imperfect action is the engine of learning here.
Okay, we've covered a lot. Defining thinking in English, dissecting that translation problem, implementing the three-step method, embracing chunks, utilizing shadowing, and confronting the fear of mistakes. The sources suggest that repeating some key phrases from the material can help internalize these concepts, right? Make them stick.
Yes, exactly. They act like little mental anchors or reminders. Let's go through them. And I really encourage you, the listener, to maybe think them or even say them quietly along with us, just to reinforce these ideas in your own mind.
Let's do it. First, the core goal. I think in English more every day.
I think in English more every day.
How we build naturalness. I speak in chunks, not word by word.
I speak in chunks, not word by word.
Facing the fear. I'm not afraid to make mistakes.
I'm not afraid to make mistakes.
That useful shadowing example we just did. Let me think. I'd say yes.
Let me think. I'd say yes.
And the ultimate definition of progress, that key idea, fluency isn't speed, it's flow.
Fluency isn't speed, it's flow. Yeah, internalizing these really helps solidify the shift in mindset that the sources are advocating for.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's about reminding yourself of the principles behind the practice. And speaking of practice, the sources culminate in a really concrete challenge to help you actually build these habits over the next week.
They do. They propose a simple, very manageable 7-day practice challenge. The idea is for the next 7 days, aim to do these 4 small things daily.
Okay, what are they?
All right, 4 things. First, name just 3 things you see around you in English. Just 3.
Okay.
Second, narrate one small action you're doing, either in your head or quietly out loud, just one action.
One action, got it.
Third, consciously try to use one full phrase or chunk during the day, maybe in a practice session or if an opportunity comes up, just one.
One chunk.
And fourth, shadow, just 10 seconds of English audio. Could be from this, could be anything, just 10 seconds.
Wow, that feels incredibly achievable. Naming 3 things, narrating one action using one chunk, and just 10 seconds of shadowing.
Exactly. The sources really emphasize that the power comes from consistency, not from doing long, overwhelming sessions.
Right.
Even just a few minutes each day dedicated to these specific tasks is enough to start actively building that habit of thinking in English for real, as they put it.
It's the cumulative effect.
It's the cumulative effect of these small, daily efforts that create significant change over time, bit by bit.
So bringing it all together then, based on this material you shared with us,
Yeah.
Thinking in English isn't some mysterious talent you're born with, or you're not.
No, not according to these sources. It is fundamentally a habit. It's a trained skill, something you build.
A habit that starts small, probably feels awkward or maybe slow at first.
Oh, almost certainly. But with consistent, targeted practice leveraging techniques like naming, narrating, using chunks, doing that shadowing, it gradually becomes your brain's natural default for more and more situations.
And the ultimate point from the sources, that moment where fluency truly feels like it begins. What is that again?
It's the moment you stop asking yourself internally, okay, how do I say this in English?
Right.
And instead, your brain simply provides the English expression, or at least the start of it, allowing you to just start saying it. That point where the thought flows directly into English speech without that conscious translation step in between.
This deep dive into the source material you provided has really illuminated how a goal that feels as big and daunting as thinking in a new language can actually be broken down into incredibly small, manageable, daily practices.
It really underscores the power of consistent, focused micro-habits, doesn't it, in achieving significant long-term change in how you use the language.
It really does.
Yeah.
So here's maybe a final provocative thought for you, our listener, to sit with. Building on the principles we've explored today from these sources, if building these small, consistent habits, like mentally naming objects or narrating simple actions, can fundamentally rewire how your brain accesses and uses something as complex as language, what other challenging skills or long-held goals in your life might become achievable if you simply identified the equivalent tiny, consistent daily practices needed to build those habits?
That's a great question. It suggests the same approach, breaking down complex challenges into small, actionable, consistent steps might be a universal key to mastery, not just for language.
A fascinating idea to consider for sure. Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive into the source material you brought to us. Thank you so much for sharing it and for joining us on this exploration today.
Yes, thank you. We truly hope these insights and practices provide a clear path forward for you on your journey to thinking and ultimately flowing in English. And feel free to revisit this deep dive or the source material itself whenever you need a refresher or maybe just a bit of motivation.